Hello everyone, Bashar here. So the July fusion has been announced. I think it's going to start on the 1st of July. It's a legendary attack. Demon Spawn. We have Magic Affinity. He looks like a bug a little bit. Skorid the Halfspawn. Okay. Well, what he does, let's take a look at him. Attacks one enemy, has a 60% chance with books of applying a debuff spread effect, taking a hex debuff and placing it on all enemies. If the target isn't under a hex debuff, we'll spread one other random debuff instead. Okay, so I don't think that will work in a smart way. I mean, if the target has hex and if the other targets have hex, right, immediately gives the impression of Hydra to mind. It will still try to spread the hex, I think. Too much value there then. Okay, let's take a look. Anathema Burst, 3 turn cooldown. Attacks one enemy, places a 50% increased attack buff before attacking. So this stuff is pretty important, guys. Now that we have Synchronos, we cannot always assume that the attackers that we use will have the proper buffs on them, right? So self-buffing champions or enemy debuffing champions are very good. So that's why, for example, Ragash is very good because Ragash self-buffs and also debuffs, right? He has AoE, CC, stun, for example. He has AoE decreased defense and he buffs himself with increased defense. Cupidus is another example. That stuff is pretty important. And before attacking means this ability will deal 50% increased damage and repeats the attack on all enemies under a hex debuff. That is pretty good, right? I mean, literal double damage. And so if you also include the increased attack as well, it's going to deal, triple of what the skill intends. And we'll also ignore shield buffs against targets under a hex debuff. That doesn't translate to Hydra very well. Okay, and Infernal Malediction, 3 turn cooldown, attacks all enemies. Before attacking, place a hex debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. The damage inflicted by this skill increased by 20% for each hex debuff placed. So, if I understand it correctly, because if it is before attacking, you will not be subjected to weak hits, at least for the purposes of placing that hex. Right? So, there are red heads around, there are force affinity heads around. So he will still place it, and fail only 3% of the time, provided you have enough accuracy, right? The 35% nasty weak hit is not going to be around. I mean, you will be weak hitting, of course, but I think the hex will be placed independent from the weak hit. Heals this champion by 20% of their max HP for each hex debuff resisted or blocked. Okay. Okay. Halfspawn. Fills this champion turn meter by 10% when attacking targets under without hex debuff, and will ignore 15% of targets defense when they are under hex debuff. So guys, I wish that was 25% instead of 15%, because 25 synergizes very well with the Helm Smasher, Savage, Live Arena. You can stack it pretty high. I mean, of course, now you can stack it as well, but that 10% is going to make a difference. So I did talk very specifically about Hydra, guys, and that's the vibe I'm getting from this guy. But problem is, he doesn't bring anything other than hex and a lot of damage. Right? And from Hydra champions, we generally want a lot. Yeah, I don't know how good that will be. Anywhere else, I think in PvP is very dangerous to bring because, being debuff heavy is not very good these days. There are lots of polymorphs around. And also, applying debuffs is pretty hard because there are a lot of high resist targets alongside with, infinite stone skin, right, all around the place. So I don't think he can do anything in PvP at all. He can do something in Hydra. He can definitely do some stuff in Synchronos. I mean, he is not very good, but I don't even ever express that opinion, right? I mean, right? for me, every single fusion is worth going for. I mean, if I take my example to the extreme, guys, if they made a fusion with an empty text box, right? No abilities, right? He's just a legendary and he sits there looking pretty or looking ugly in the case of this fella, I would still do it, right? Because it's a potential faction guardian, it's a legendary. You never know the potential. It could get buffed and whatnot, right? So that's why I always go for it. So that is the upcoming fusion, but I am by no means impressed. I mean, let's be real here. I'm not saying this is a very good fusion, do it. I'm just saying fusions are worth going for, and that's why I go for it. This guy is not really very impressive, and you never know the potential of the champion guy. So just by taking a look at these, his skill set, you can't fully realize its potential, right? And when I say you, I don't mean anyone, right? I mean, no one can, right? Because you can think of something, but there is maybe some sort of nice interaction that, happens. So, for example, guys, how many people were able to tell that Blizzard was going to solo Sand Devil, right? I mean, the general word around was, a garbage skip, right? That's what was being said. And I also wasn't very impressed with it either, right? So I'm not going to take credit for that. But someone discovered that after he was obtained, right? And the thing is, if you don't obtain that, right? And when they discover something nice that can help your account, it's skipped forever, right? It's gone forever. That's why I suggest going for it. So for example, guys, if there was some way of grabbing it afterwards, I would have, for example, suggested skipping this one, right? But there is no take back, right? It's a 2-week thing, right? You get it during that time or you don't, right? And if you don't, it's gone forever, right? I mean, you will have to wait for the champion come out of a shard for you, which is, very, very unlikely. So yeah, by no means impressive, but also this is a little bit curious. So I'm not very sure how this means. Fills this champion 10% by fills this champion turn meter by 10% when attacking targets without the hex debuff. So if I AoE with the A2, for example, and let's say they have no hex, will I get 40% turn meter? Or I mean, I'm fully strictly talking about Hydra, sorry, but as I said, that's the main use of this guy. And the problem that I don't give you a vote of confidence to this guy is because he looks like mainly Hydra focus, and he is not very good in Hydra, because guys, we can only bring 6 guys to Hydra, and there are a lot of roles to be fulfilled, right? And everyone should be fulfilling multiple roles, right? So for example, you want decreased attack, you want decreased speed, you want decreased defense, you want increased speed, right? You want some sort of healing, be it leech or from the champion's abilities. You want at least 2, if not 3 damages. You want a hex debuff, right? You want some mischief tanks. You want a provoker. You want a block buff champion, right? There are a lot of roles to fulfill, right? And when one guy does hex only and damage, that damage better be very high, because he will be increasing the burden on the remaining champions, right? So 5 champions will have to fulfill everything other than hex. Not easy, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe, guys, because the thing is, maybe his multipliers are very good. I don't think so, but there is a chance that the multipliers are very good, right? I mean, these abilities. And also, another thing is that this ability is a single target, so the guy has only 1 AoE. That is also, in the disfavor of this guy, because you generally want at least 2 AoE attacks with, Hydra champions, Hydra damages. Yeah, that's my take on it. So let's see you on the fusion and in the channel. Bye-bye.